Season 2 of Silo ended on a burning door, and almost everyone who watched it thought they understood what had happened behind it. Season 3 opens by proving that assumption wrong. Inside a single episode called Memory, the 5th hour of the season, written by Catherine DiSavino and directed by Eric Avellino. Here's the trick the show pulled on us. Season 3 opened with 4 facts, no explanation attached. Juliet came back from her execution. Juliet became mayor. Juliet lost her memory. Bernard died in the incinerator. For 4 episodes, we sat inside that summary as if it were the whole truth. It wasn't. Memory goes back underneath those 4 facts and shows you that none of them happened by accident, and none of them happened the way the Silo's official record says they did. One person built all 4 outcomes in the same week, using nothing more dangerous than paperwork. And it's not who you'd expect. Right after the rebellion, the algorithm, the Silo's governing AI, pulls Robert Sims out of the vault and installs his wife, Camille, as the new head of IT. Camille comes back with an assignment she won't explain. 3 names have been flagged as existential threats to Silo 18. Juliette Nichols, Bernard Holland, Lucas Kyle. She hands the practical half of that assignment to Robert and keeps the reasoning to herself. Robert doesn't push back. Instead, he starts asking his own questions, and the first one goes to the doctor treating Juliette and Bernard after the airlock. He wants to know which patient is likely to die naturally, without anyone having to do anything messy. It sounds like routine paperwork. It's a man quietly checking whether he can avoid an execution altogether. The doctor explains something that matters more than the question did. Any body from that airlock counts as contaminated. It has to be sealed in plastic, carried by porters, moved through the levels on a pulley system, and delivered for cremation with paperwork at every stage. Robert's response is the most telling beat in the episode. Getting rid of a body through that process is such a hassle. He says they might as well hope both patients survive. Then he picks up the plastic sheeting himself and starts wrapping Bernard in it while Bernard is still conscious. For a long stretch, this plays like an execution because technically it is one. Bernard is aware enough to know what's happening, and the last thing he does with that awareness is talk. He tells Robert about the safeguard. He tells him Lucas already knows about it. He tells him Juliet knows how to stop it. Then Robert cuts a slit in the plastic so a dying man can breathe. There's no confession scene here. The show gives you the reversal as an action instead of dialogue. Robert wraps a body because procedure says to wrap a body, then uses that same procedure to smuggle a living man past everyone watching for exactly that. Martha and Carla help him move Bernard through the system, and neither likes him for it. They just love Juliet more than they distrust him. That's the whole method in miniature. Robert never breaks a rule to save anyone. He spent 3 seasons proving he understands the machinery from the inside, and this is the first time we see him turn that understanding against the people who built it. Bernard's rescue needed machinery and secrecy. Juliet's needed the opposite. You cannot hide the most visible person in the silo, so Robert doesn't try. He has an operative named Pike plant one idea into the crowd already gathered around Juliet. The silo just lost its mayor, and here's the woman who walked outside and survived. The idea spreads on its own. Within days, the population is pushing IT and judicial to install Juliet as mayor, and Camille is boxed in by her own decision-making process. Killing a mayor the public just demanded, days after a rebellion, is the fastest route to the exact instability the algorithm exists to prevent. Robert never has to out-argue that risk calculation. He just has to put Juliet on the correct side of it and let the system protect her automatically, which reframes her mayorship this season. Every scene where that title looked hollow was accurate. The job was never about giving her authority. It was about making her too expensive to remove. The third name on that list, Lucas Kyle, gets saved by something closer to nothing at all. Robert is the officer responsible for carrying out that order, and he simply never does it, while everyone above him assumes he already has. The algorithm's list isn't random. Bernard knows the safeguard exists and knows there are dozens of other silos out there. Lucas independently worked out that the air outside isn't actually lethal, so he can prove it instead of just repeating what he's been told. Juliet knows how the safeguard can be stopped. Put those 3 pieces together, and you get the entire shape of what this place is built to hide. The algorithm didn't flag troublemakers. It flagged the only complete account of the truth walking around the building. While recovering and hiding, Bernard fills in the picture for Martha, telling her there are roughly 50 other silos out there, all listening on the wrong radio frequency for their entire existence. He hands over the correct one, with a warning. Silo 1 monitors active channels, and a sudden conversation on a dead frequency is exactly the anomaly that can trigger a safeguard from 1,000 miles away. But the detail that changes Robert's career is a document called the Order, the internal rulebook that exists only for the head of IT and their security chief. It states that anyone on memory suppression drugs has to be kept away from objects connected to their past, because contact with those objects can undo the treatment. Robert has spent his adult life enforcing a ban on exactly those objects. Relics have always been treated in this show as a heritage crime, evidence of a past the silo doesn't want people dwelling on. That reading was never wrong, just incomplete. The ban has a mechanism behind it, not just an ideology. Relics aren't outlawed because they inspire nostalgia. They're outlawed because they're the antidote to the drug the silo uses to erase people. The raids, the sentences, the informants, all of it exists to protect a chemical. Robert built his career on that machinery and was never told what it protected. He wasn't a participant in the system. He was a tool of it. So he acts on it. He goes to a relic dealer named Regina with 2 jobs. Get counterfeit pills to a nurse so Juliet's real suppressants can be swapped out while the algorithm keeps believing she's being obediently erased, and quietly reacquire Juliet's old belongings, because those objects have just become medicine. Regina needs currency, so she manufactures sheriff's badges stamped with Juliet's name, playing off a population that already treats her like a folk hero. The badge she sells in the season's premiere, the one that read like tacky fan merchandise for a personality cult, was actually funding a covert medical operation. The show planted that detail 4 episodes before it mattered. The episode doesn't let Robert off clean, though. His plan required Juliet to genuinely forget for a while, because if she'd stayed sharp, Camille and the algorithm would have realized the drugs weren't working. So he let the suppression run too long, by his own account, and the woman who came out the other side lost more of herself than his plan called for. That's the direct cause of most of the season's suffering, including the moment she read him as a threat at her own daughter's school, and the moment she panicked and fled into the down deep. His reasoning holds up. Every direct explanation risked exposing everyone helping him. That doesn't make the damage any less real, and the episode doesn't rush to resolve that tension. Back in the present, the circle of people who know the truth gathers at Martha's, and Juliet starts handling her recovered belongings one at a time, hoping something reconnects. Almost everything produces a flicker and nothing more. Eventually, they land on a watch, the one her father gave her, confiscated when she was sent outside, passed through 2 other characters before reaching the man who's kept it safe through an entire rebellion. It's the emotionally loaded object. Every instinct television has trained you on says this is the key. It isn't. It helps, and it isn't enough. And that failure might be the smartest choice in the hour. If the sentimental object had worked, the show would be arguing that memory responds to how much you care about something. Having it fail argues something colder. The drug doesn't recognize meaning. It's a chemical process, and what breaks it is sensory contact, not significance. What actually works is a small plastic duck, a Pez dispenser Robert has been carrying and hands back to her on a stairwell, mid-conversation about Camille wanting her dead. It comes back whole, not in fragments like everything else that hour. The months she lost arrive all at once. Inside that returned memory is the detail the group has been waiting on. All season, the safeguard has been described as a doomsday switch the system reaches for when a silo becomes unsalvageable. What Juliet recovers is that its infrastructure. The poison is delivered through a pipe, and somebody in a different, now-dead silo already figured out how to cap theirs. That's not a solution. It's a proof of concept attached to a search problem. They know the thing can be done. They don't know where the equivalent pipe runs through their own building's 100+ levels of machinery, designed so nobody living inside it would ever understand how it works. That single fact reframes a location the show has treated as a cautionary tale for 2 seasons. Silo 17 wasn't just the dead silo Juliet barely survived. It's the one place that beat the exact weapon this silo fears most. The silent survivor living down, there isn't a man who got lucky in an empty building. He's the only living witness to a silo that's solved this problem, which is exactly why the conversation where he explained it to Juliet is the one the algorithm erased. The suppression was never really about what she saw outside. It was aimed at one specific piece of engineering. 350 years earlier, the episode gives its second timeline one scene, built to pull the floor out from under Daniel and Helen. They've connected a public advocate for restricting artificial intelligence to a naval carrier that, on one specific night, launched only a handful of analog aircraft while every other ship launched dozens. Someone deliberately kept 4 planes offline from the modern systems, and the man most publicly opposed to unchecked machines was standing on deck when it happened. On their way to meet a source, their rental car turns on its own, without either of them touching the wheel. A mundane explanation exists, since networked vehicles in that period can be remotely accessed by anyone with the right clearance. A less mundane one also exists, that whatever is steering the car is connected to the same authority that, centuries later, decides who lives inside a vault. The show doesn't confirm either reading yet. What it confirms is the bigger shift. Daniel and Helen have been outsiders investigating a conspiracy from a distance. After that car turns, their cargo, delivered somewhere they didn't choose. The same day, Juliet stops being managed and starts being able to act on what she knows that here's context worth knowing. This entire amnesia arc doesn't exist in Hugh Howey's original novels. It's a structural choice made for this season alone, likely to keep Juliet relevant while the story splits its runtime with a timeline set centuries earlier. Seasons 3 and 4 were filmed back-to-back, adapting the second and third books in the trilogy, Shift and Dust, and this is the final season the show has planned. That invention split the audience. Critics rated this season close to perfect out of the gate. General audience scores landed far lower, mostly from viewers frustrated that the show's most compelling character spent an entire season not remembering anything she'd already fought for. Memory is the episode where that frustration gets a payoff, because it explains the amnesia had an actual mechanism and an actual architect, not a plot device the writers were going to quietly walk back. It's worth noting the memory drug concept isn't purely invented, either. Governments experimenting with controlling what people remember is documented history, going back to Cold War-era programs built around exactly that goal. Silo isn't inventing a new kind of horror. It's dramatizing an old one, moved underground. None of this makes Robert Sims a hero, and the episode is careful not to argue that it does. He interrogated by procedure. He raided homes for relics by procedure. People died because he followed orders during the rebellion, and one covert rescue doesn't buy that back. Martha and Carla help him and still can't stand him, which is exactly the right temperature for where his arc should sit. What changed isn't his method. It's who that method serves. He spent this entire series proving that the person who understands how a machine works is the person best positioned to turn it, and getting cut out of the vault didn't remove that skill. It just removed his reason to point it anywhere but toward the people he's actually loyal to. The episode ends on Robert and Camille passing each other, framed with real distance between them, neither saying anything. She's above him, looking down. Whether she's piecing together what he's done, or has already suspected it and is deciding what to do about a husband she can't afford to be right about, is left open. Guessing now would only buy false tidiness. Episode 6, titled The Drive, follows Memory a week later, and it's the hour where Juliet stops gathering information and starts acting on it, with Camille almost certainly aware something has shifted underneath her. If you've been watching this season purely for the mystery box, this is the episode where the show proves it had an actual architecture underneath the mystery the whole time, not just a string of unexplained events waiting to be revealed one at a time. That's harder to pull off than it looks, and worth recognizing when a show actually does it. That's Memory. If this kind of breakdown is useful to you, there's more of this coming as the rest of the season airs.